Invocation to the Muse. Invocation to the Muse, in the context of the record Vindicate, is a reference to a very ancient literary device that was used often in epic poems and literature, but is used chiefly in terms of what I'm referencing here in Paradise Lost by Milton. Obviously, anybody who has read into some of the narrative stuff I've talked about with this record knows that Paradise Lost played a big factor into the inspiration for the record. But the idea with the invocation to the muse, as I understand it, was you are essentially calling upon the gods of art or the things that are influencing you in some capacity to be with you in your artistic endeavor. And so I like the idea of doing that when writing this very sort of distilled form of revenge and the sort of vengeful nature and the vindictive spirit that this speech really is a almost I want to say not necessarily over the top form of, but in many ways it is. The idea is this is the inner dialogue. This is the thing that you feel when you feel that very vengeful spirit. And in many ways, there is hope within that, the idea that you're going to rise out of a difficult situation or show somebody who's done something wrong to you that they were wrong. But the flip side of that and the undercurrent of this is a very dark and what you might say unhealthy idea. The idea that you're going to base your entire ideology or the way that you are on this idea of getting back at someone or getting back at your perceived villains. And just personally, this is something that I have vacillated with my entire life. And I wanted this record to really go through that whole cycle of feeling. The idea is that it starts with the most vengeful feeling possible. And as the record goes along, you hit all those different iterations of that feeling. By the time we get to Eschaton at the end, you are seeing more of the futility of revenge and how what you wanted out of getting back at your perceived villains maybe wasn't what you got. And if you listen to the record, and we'll get through this as we go through the album, in sequential order, sonically it matches tonally the very end to the very beginning. So you can listen to it on a loop. And this sort of loop of emotions, the screw this person, I'm going to get back at them, all the way through to maybe it wasn't worth spending my whole life focusing on revenge, loops back around. But this is the call to arms, in a sense, for revenge. This is the idea that you are not going to sit down and take it. You're going to rise up against your detractors. And I really wanted it to sort of walk the line between something that feels encouraging and uplifting and also has an undercurrent of maybe this is a little too dark and maybe this is not necessarily the way that we should be, right? I didn't want it to feel as if it had a emotional or ideological certainty to it. It feels a little icky and it also feels to me inspiring. And I wanted both of those things to be in there. Both the feeling of, yeah, I'm going to rise up and do what I want. And also, is what this person's saying maybe a little over the top in their tone? And so I hope that when people listen to the record, whatever it is they take away from it, some version of that makes its way in, because in reality, so much of this record plays with that duality of certainty. And I like that it really kicks off from the beginning right before we get into what is the beginning of the album. Vindicate. Vindicate is obviously the title track of the record, and the song that I personally feel from a lyrical perspective most personifies the idea or the ideology that I've talked about that I kind of wanted to explore on this record. As a song, it has a longer history in terms of Jake's original demo, and obviously the Calliope music at the beginning is a kind of an interesting way to begin the record. I viewed it the first time I heard the musical demo as sort of the chaos that we are entering into in this sort of emotional narrative. The idea that these feelings and this universe that we inhabit and the sort of cultural conversation being so incredibly bizarre at all times, the sort of circus nature of that, and the kind of wild attempts that we make to make ourselves right within our certainties, those things sort of manifest in a lot of ways. And I felt that the clown music, for lack of a better term, as an introduction, would be a great way to kick off into what is really the beginning of saying, I will do what I want in my life, and I will not be a victim of what you think about me, or what you say about me, or the ways in which you have tried to hold me back in my life. And obviously that is a messaging and something that has been a significant part of my lyrics for many years, and a message that the band has sort of been champions of since really our very beginnings. But I wanted for this record and for this version of that to feel more literal. In a lot of ways, when I was younger, the idea of the outcasts and rising up against the drudgery of life, there was a little bit more of an abstract nature to it, because when you're very young, your experiences are more limited. And in a lot of ways, because I was so young when the band started, I was speaking directly to the people that a year before, when I was working on the first record's lyrics, was in high school with, and or when I first started my first iteration of the band, the people who openly rooted for it to fail. Those were the kind of the original impetus. But over time, and as you get older, and I'm writing the lyrics to this record at 34 years old, I'm in a position where my life, I have dealt with a lot more villains, so to speak, and I have had to weather those storms, as we all have in the band, and as we all have, more broadly speaking. And so my hope was that this song would be a nice way to bring back the messaging that we have always believed in and been behind, but do so in a way that is really true to where we are now in our life. I've often talked about, I find it bothersome that many bands have sort of a feigned ideology, or they're speaking to you, being the listener, in a way that they feel you are, and the sort of insulting nature of that. I never want someone to feel like, when they're listening to our songs or reading my lyrics, that I believe I know everything about them and I'm going to write a song for you. I've always wanted to just write about the things that I feel, and I hope that they relate to you, and I hope that they make you feel something. But I am not sitting down trying to think of what will make you respond, because when you do that, I believe that it is artless. I believe that it is pandering in a way that is insulting. And I do not want to insult you with our songs. And so I feel that Vindicate is really the beginning of the story. And I hope that as you listen to the album, it puts you in the headspace of this sort of narrative of revenge and vindication, and sort of getting back at your detractors, but also the potential follies of that lifestyle, and how we all can fall victim occasionally to the hubris of sort of anger, I guess, or the self-belief that comes from a severe level of anger. Something that you need only search my name on the internet to find I have been guilty of many times. But I believe in the idea of standing up for yourself, even when standing up for yourself may come off as arrogant or what have you. So the important thing to me is that this song was lyrically the thing that kicks the album off and tells you sort of the journey that we're going to go on, and the things that I'm going to try to convey through the lyrics on this record. I think Vindicate is one of my favorite songs on the record. I love the chorus. I love everything about this one. It feels very Black Veil Brides, but it also feels like like where we're at currently musically, and just how the record has shaped up. I think that this is a really good way to kick things off. And I think, again, it's very emblematic of where things go ultimately with the record.
So certain every day you will found the perfect way to got the lions from the slaughter you have started. You were lost and I have tried to say.
Certainty. Certainty was the final song written for the record. We had essentially finished the album, so to speak, in the sense that we were done tracking, and we thought maybe there might just be one thing that's missing. And for me, lyrically, which is kind of what I'm talking about specifically in these, the theme of the record, as much as it's about revenge and vindication, it's also about these certainties that we hold for ourselves ideologically, emotionally, that help us build these sort of revenge arcs within ourselves, or feeling like we have an enemy to go against. And I'm certainly constantly, I don't want to say guilty of it because I don't know that there's anything to be guilty of, but it is part and parcel, particularly culturally today, of just existing in our society. There is a team and there is a thought process by which we belong, and there are people who see things differently, and so the battle is sort of incessant and going on at all times. Now, on some level, those things are sort of, I guess, more specific as they pertain to things like social or political issues. But I was viewing this more through the prism of the conversations that we have with ourselves and the ways that we can make ourselves the hero of our own story and someone else the villain. And I think that in a lot of ways, that methodology can be beneficial, certainly in the way that you can build yourself up and feel confidence within yourself by virtue of the fact that you feel like you are doing the right things in life. But there also is a tremendous level of short-sightedness that can come from that. And you can find yourself in a position where you never question your own actions. And obviously that's not healthy, to never feel like you are willing to take responsibility for something that you've done wrong is not a way to live. And I think that we see it culturally more and more and more, this idea that I am certain that the things I say and do and think are correct and that someone else is wrong. That is a constant and unending element, especially in modern life. And so I wanted to be able to speak about it through the context of this, because you're also sometimes, and at least for me lyrically, I am thinking at times in the course of writing these songs and saying what I'm trying to say with the assumption that I am right in the way that I'm talking. You can't help it. It just happens. And so there are other moments on the record that this idea is mentioned, but it didn't feel like it was explicitly said. And so Jake put together this demo, and I immediately felt like, oh, I know exactly what I want to say with this. And I finished the lyrics for this song, I want to say within probably an hour or less, because I just knew this record needed to have this element and this needed to be said this way. And it just so happens that the song was really great and felt like an exciting element to add to the record, and ultimately has become one of the singles from the album. So this is one that I think is very special, both tonally, it represents a tonal shift musically for the band, but lyrically for me, I think it kind of, if Vindicate is one side of that coin, and it's about the positives of that lifestyle or worldview, certainty is the other side of the coin, which is sort of the pitfalls of being certain that you're right and how difficult that can be on all of us. So, yeah, that is, to me, what makes this song so special from a lyrical perspective, and musically, I think it's just one of the best songs on the whole record. Bleeders was obviously the first song written for the record and the first song released for the album. The music video, directed by Jensen Owen, was an incredible experience for us and an opportunity specifically for me to get to play one of my favorite characters, of any kind of all time, and a character that has influenced me since I was a very little kid and got familiarized with the original cast recording of Sweeney Todd and the Len Carew version of the character, and then on through to being a teenager when the Tim Burton Johnny Depp movie came out, and it's just been a huge part of my life and something that I always wanted to get to do. Now, this song was part of the kind of original version of the record. And by that, I mean my original thought process for the album was that I wanted to do a more direct, almost retelling of, or I'm not sure because we didn't get very far in it before I pivoted in terms of what I wanted to do. But initially, the idea was that this album would be a rock opera representation of the story of Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained by Milton. And so in the early days, there was a song called House of Woe and Pain, which is a line from Paradise Lost, that was an entirely different song. And then there was a song called Paragon, which ultimately became Bleeders. So my initial lyrics and idea for this song was much more in line with the Paradise Lost story and writing more directly about kind of Lucifer's fall from grace. As the song went along, I started to feel more interested in writing this about the way that it feels to be someone that has been in the public eye in some capacity. Now, obviously, I'm not trying to insinuate that I'm some large-scale celebrity, but people have been paying attention to me since I was 16 years old. And the positives that have come from that, in that I have an incredible career and I get the opportunity to make these records and that you are listening to me talk right now. But the other side of that coin in some ways has been that there is an odd sort of push and pull of negativity that can occur when people are just noticing or paying attention to you for ostensibly your entire life, and certainly my entire adult life. And how sometimes being under that light on that stage can be an odd place to be, particularly when you see people say things about yourself or your family or your loved ones that are wildly inaccurate, but they say it with such I guess, certainty, to use the term. And then those things propagate and you see more of it. And it's just sort of an interesting place to be. And then during the course of writing this, I started to kind of see more and more of this was kind of during an odd period post-pandemic where we were seeing kind of a new rise in these sort of rock musicians seemingly in name only, right? In the sense that it was a lot of social media influencers who were making sort of pop punk adjacent records that didn't really seem to have a particularly large amount of depth in terms of substance. And it's not a criticism of the music because that's what music's for. There are many people who don't like what we do, but I was just interested and fascinated in, since I was someone who's been on stage since I was a kid, how it would seem like such a fruitless task to go be on stage without saying anything. The idea of being famous as a musician and having said nothing, or having shared nothing of yourself in any way, or not having a story to tell in some way, seemed even more bizarre to me than the idea of sharing yourself with an audience for your whole life. I'm speaking to you in the capacity of a person who is 35 years old, and from the time that I was literally in high school, I have been telling you about my life and my thoughts, and doing so through the art that I have been a part of making. And so the idea of becoming really famous as a quote-unquote rock musician with no substance to say anything or no interest in saying anything seems even more bizarre. So it's a little bit about the idea that fame is this sort of fickle animal, and in a lot of ways, maintaining that and keeping it is also in itself an odd thing. And for me, to circle this back, this is when lyrically, I started really getting interested in, well, what are the reasons why I push myself so much? And one of them is the love of doing this. But another is, admittedly, all the people who said I couldn't do this, I very much need to prove them wrong. And I realized that about myself. I realized that that is a part of myself, good or bad, that is intrinsically built into the music and art that I'm a part of making. And so I started thinking, well, what's the ultimate revenge story in my mind? And obviously there's a million, but for me, because I'm such a Sweeney Todd fan, the story of Sweeney Todd comes to mind. They used to call it the revenge sickle for musical. It is a revenge story and uh, a very plainly written one in the sense that it shows you the follies of revenge as well. He gets his revenge and it costs him his life. And I thought, well, maybe that's the way to pursue this. So we were working with Eric Ron, and this is the one song on the record that Jake and I did not produce alone. Eric was the producer on this song and involved in the writing of the song. And I just started going back and forth with Eric with this set of lyrics that I had written that were for this song Paragon, and saying, well, how do we make this? How do I change this to fit this story that I want to tell? And we kind of started throwing things back and forth and really recorded, because a version of this song was recorded with Paragon as the title and in the lyrics, and re-recorded as many parts as needed to sort of make sense with the story. And the song really came alive. And everything just made a lot more sense to me musically when this story became kind of what this was about or why this existed. And obviously the video was an incredible, huge production. And this song really set the tone for what this record would be. And, will go on to be one in the pantheon of Black Veil songs. It has already proven itself as one of the big songs in our catalog, and has done a lot to get people excited about this record. And I think is an incredibly important song in our catalog. And when we look back with time, I think it'll be one of those songs that was very, very important for us. And so I appreciate how much it connected with people, but it's fun to kind of go through the whole journey of how this song came about. Hallelujah. Hallelujah is a song that, for me, was one of those kind of very exciting moments in the course of pre-production where you're putting together a song and you start to feel like, wow, we've got something tonally. And, I've said that before, and there's a lot of cases in the course of making a record that you feel like something is more substantive or you've cracked the code, so to speak. But going back and forth with Jake on this one and the different iterations of the song, it really felt like this is something that was going to be a special song. And then as we got into the studio and the final version came together, I think all of us felt like this was, maybe if Vindicate was the statement song of the record, this song was the song that would show what we've been working on. And so even when we were in the studio, I think that it was pretty clear this was going to be the first song that we wanted to put out there. Obviously, Bleeder's already being out, but the first song out of the batch of songs that we had made in earnest while making the record. Lyrically, this one is interesting because there's a lot of different interpretations that I've seen online. And being that this is a song that's been out for some time at this point, there's a lot of different things that people have said about it or what they think about it. And for me, I think that that's sort of the beauty in songwriting in general and lyrics is the listener is allowed to have the personal experience with those lyrics that is really unencumbered by what my intentions were. However, I think writing this was something where I wanted to be able to talk openly about the sort of separate nature of conversation online, especially, but also just in life. There's elements to this song that are about that sort of attempt to disparage one another that I talk about in Certainty, but also there is the evergreen nature of talking shit about a band or talking shit about a piece of art you don't like, or just devoting your entire life to being aggressive against something that maybe somebody else likes. There's that meme that you see all the time of, there's many different iterations of it, but let people enjoy things or let somebody enjoy things, something like that. That's sort of the was in some ways, I guess, the impetus for this, because I started to feel like there's this sort of self-seriousness that exists within music and within fandom, and again, to use the word again, but the certainty that breeds in these sort of siloed sections of fandom, and the people like these group of bands and they're acceptable, but these other bands are not, or the sort of random nature of classification of genres where these 5 bands are worthy of my attention, but these 5 bands are terrible garbage. It's an interesting sort of ecosystem that I've been involved in or around since I was a kid, really since I was a kid. And so that is something that I've always been kind of fascinated by. And then also the ways in which that can cause feelings of rage if you happen to be in one of those bands that is not part of the silo of these 5 bands are cool or these 5 bands are great. And, we've always had to kind of fight up against that for a long time. But then also, in recent years, the sort of oversimplification of people's perspectives and the attempt to kind of, label people as this or that based on context clues or things that you perceive yourself or things that you've made up also was certainly an impetus in terms of what this song is. But all of it is seen through the prism of this sort of religious thinking and the idea that hallelujah is something that is exclaimed with joy. To be for me to have the opportunity to use it lyrically as a way of almost having a sarcastic tone to it. And this hallelujah exclaimed with joy is hallelujah, I've sort of burned this person to the ground, is, there's certainly a tongue-in-cheek element to it, but it's also just about that feeling of being the other in that way, right? And when it came time to make the visualizer for this, we hired an incredible animator in Italy who did basically a beat-for-beat retelling or visual retelling of the story of Lucifer's fall in Paradise Lost, to go back to a point of reference that I had first going into this record. And that was really cool to be able to use that as a means of showing kind of obviously what the story of the song is about, but also something that was very near and dear to the narrative elements of this record was that ultimate othering and that ultimate sort of being cast out as a historical or biblical story. So it was really cool to be able to combine those things, to inject with the visual perspective of this, to inject the record with as much of that Paradise Lost stuff as possible. There's more of it later on in the album, but this was an opportunity to kind of show that off a little bit. And it's a song that I love playing live. We got to play it live for the first time at the Warped Tour show in Long Beach. And in rehearsal, at least for me, the number of years that we've rehearsed songs and tried new songs out or tried old songs that we've never played, some songs just immediately click. And tonally that this is going to be something that's going to be a staple in the set list because the energy is there and the band really feels it when we're playing it. But by the way, there are also songs that you play that you go, oh no, this doesn't work live. And that's always unfortunate. But this one, the energy was just immediate. And that first show, it was kind of exciting and a little bit of a tightrope walk because it's being live streamed around the world. The very first time that we are ever going to play this song is going to be heard around the world, live streamed with a, generally speaking, kind of odd soundboard mix in terms of we don't know what the live audio is going to be like compared to what it's going to sound like, if you're at the concert versus what it's going to sound like compressed on a stream. And we were just so confident in the song and so excited about playing the song that I don't think that even registered once we got out to the stage. I remember kicking into it and just being so excited, and we've played it every show since that moment and we'll continue to play it. I think it's definitely a new staple for us live, and a song that I hope continues to find its audience and grow over the course of the years. But it was the perfect first song out of the gate for people to kind of hear what we've been working on in the studio. I also want to mention while we're talking about it, the incredible choir that came in here in Tampa, the One Voice Ensemble Choir, who with their director, it was unbelievable. It's really cool in this life of music to be able to bear witness to incredible talent and just undeniable talent. They walked into the room, we gave them the parts, I talked them through it a little bit, and they were off to the races and took it and just did so many incredible things with it. And take after take after take, uh, incredible voices, incredible musicianship, and made the song. So much so that that initial idea of having the choir voice open the song did not exist in the demo. That started simply when we heard them sing that hallelujah line. I went, this has to be the intro. And so if you've seen any of the videos, the documentary videos, I'm not sure when that will be out, but you can see us kind of put it at the top of the song and go, this has to be where it goes. And I think that the choir makes the song. They were incredible, and it was a real honor to get to work with them. So I want to make sure I give a shout out to them on that. But that is Hallelujah. Cut. Cut is a song that, for me, there's those songs in your catalog. If you're a musician, then you have a number of records that you've done over the years that some of them feel like that you were able to achieve exactly what you wanted to achieve and put in the work to get there. For a long time, I've talked about how Lost It All on Wretched and Divine was a song that started out as one idea and took a long time to build out to where it ultimately went and what it became. And I'm extremely proud of that song. And there were times when that song was really unlistenable in its early stages. Now, what's different about Cut was presented to us initially as a very different idea. And we were very lucky to get to work with Ben Bruce and his writing partner. And they had come up with the initial idea for a song that was tonally very similar to this. And, we were on tour, I believe, and Ben had sent it over. And I remember hearing that demo and going, "Oh, this is incredible," and I hear where we could go with this. And so, taking that initial demo and then Jake and Jinx really digging in and finding the way to build it out, and then I went in and wrote my parts and did what I could to try to make a song that felt lyrically like it was representative of the emotion tonally of the song, but also something that was sincere and tied into the narrative as much as possible. And with this one, I really wanted it to be, I wanted a universality from the lyrics. I wanted to be able to make something that felt evergreen in terms of what the lyrical content was. And I wanted it to be true to experiences, and obviously that's all those things I just said are the case for any song that you're writing lyrics for. You want it to feel sincere. But I think more than anything, I was so in love with the initial idea that Ben had brought to us and where Jake and Jinx had taken that initial idea. And I felt like I really wanted to pour all of myself into this. And I have had a tremendous number of experiences in my life, as we all have, as you listening to this have had. I'm certain of it. Where someone that you believed in, someone that you put your faith in, someone that you worked with or creative with, or a friendship or a work situation or whatever, somebody that you felt was a sincere and honest partner in your life in some capacity, lets you down in a very big way. And in my work, in being in the entertainment industry, that is part and parcel with doing it. I mean, it's a very sort of, I'm sure you have all the information that exists out there of how sort of cutthroat people can be in this business. And as unfortunate as that is, because art should be the thing that comes first, the reality is the commerce and the way people handle the commerce is pretty brutal. And I have had people that I thought were trustworthy turn out to not be. I have had situations where I probably handled something incorrectly. And that was the duality that I wanted to make sure was present there, because in reality, no matter how much you feel with certainty, to use the word again, that you are in the right, I'm sure there's any number of things that any of us do in any situation that falls apart where we have blame and we have responsibility in that situation. And so, what does that feel like when someone tears you down in a way that was unexpected, or someone that you placed on a pedestal falls from grace, or someone knocks you down? What is that? And that word cut just kept floating into my head. And that feeling of being cut down, whether it's from a friendship or a partnership or whatever it is, and or even, a relationship. Many people in their lives go through that in relationships. But specifically for me, it was really resonating with this idea that the harder you work and the more trust you put in people, the more vulnerable you are. And especially when I was so young starting the band, I had that so often occur. And so as I'm writing out the words for this song and building out what ultimately the narrative would be, one thing kept occurring to me, which was that my wife, Lilith, has gone through very similar situations. And in fact, probably more than I've ever seen in terms of being aggressively let down by people in the industry or mistreated by people within the industry. And her experience as a woman in the industry is something that really was very eye opening for me in viewing it over the years. And so, even just reading the lyrics back as I was finishing them, it felt like, oh, this is a song that we need to do together. And it was very organic in that way. And I think I presented it to the band and said, hey, this is what I want to do. And everybody was really excited about it. And I can tell you the day that she came into the studio and tracked this, it was just like a hand in glove situation. Her voice fits so perfectly within this song and all the different iterations and ideas to get to this point. And it really made the song in a way that, I think the proof is in the song itself. When you listen to it, I believe it's one of the strongest, certainly one of the strongest, what you might call grandiose ballads or power ballads or whatever these terms that are thrown around are. But in this vein, and we've done many songs stylistically not too dissimilar to this, I think this is by far and away the best one of these we've ever done. I think that all the instrumentation is wild in this. I mean, we had a full orchestra that Jinx conducted. He wrote the charts and conducted himself in the studio. Jake built out some of the most lush and beautiful instrumentation, and one of my favorite guitar solos of his. Cece's drums are just incredible and so tasteful, and it's just it is one of my favorite songs the band has ever done. And to think that I remember sitting in the back lounge and hearing the first demo that Ben had sent over, all the way to where we took the song and where it is now. It just feels like such an incredible achievement. And especially, and I've talked about before, we have such a history with Ben, and he's been my friend for so long, and our careers mirrored each other so much. It really was, it really just feels like the fulfillment of such an amazing experience to be able to write a song with him. And I had never worked with his writing partner before, but also incredibly talented and really added the perfect stylistic choices there. Paul is his name. Paul Bartolome, I believe, is the pronunciation. But just an incredible team. And for us as a band to get together and go, hey, we know what this song is, and build it out the way that we did, and to have Lilith's voice on it, and to have, again, the one voice ensemble choir on this song. I could listen to this song 8,000 times in a row and it would never get old to me. It's one of my favorite songs we've ever done. And it's also a very unique song on this record. This record is a very heavy and what you might say dark record. And so this is an interesting moment of stylistic shift within the album. And I think it really is earned within the album, and I feel very proud of it. And I think it's, again, one of the best things we've ever done. So I hope you love it. And that's Cut. Alive. Alive is a song that went through a couple different iterations, but at every point always felt like tonally it was going to be kind of where it ended up. We always knew we wanted this song to be kind of an ass kicker and very aggressive song. I think that there was always the intention to have primarily screaming verses in this song. I don't think that there was ever any other kind of iteration of it. The chorus went through some different changes, and the structure of the song went through some different changes. But I think ultimately Jake found what was going to be the pattern in terms of how the screaming pattern would go in the verses, and we kind of went from there. I was really playing around with a lot of different lyrics on this song and titles and ideas, but the word alive was always there. The line "I'm alive," um, and so it's interesting. You find inspiration in different places, and in the spring of 2024, I was just feeling kind of low in terms of dealing with shit on the internet and whatever, the kind of thing that we all go through at some point. If you have any uh if you're in any capacity a public figure, there are going to be times when everyone decides that they hate you for a minute or whatever it is. And one thing that I've always had an abiding belief is that the people that matter to you and the true love and hope that you have in your life are the things that matter way more than any ancillary momentary issue. And so being able to think about, well, I'm alive. I'm here. I've got my wife. I've got my family. I've got the things that I care about. I've got this band. And we had the great benefit of being on tour a lot in that time and getting to meet fans every day. So on the internet, a bomb has exploded of everyone being mad at you. And then you meet people every single day coming to the shows who are so kind and the opposite and talking about the distinction of how much your music has helped them in some way or another. And so being able to uh, see that distinction and go, oh, the negativity is not representative of the way that the art is received. A lot of people don't know this, but I was having pretty severe panic attacks around that time. And at one point, we were doing a photo shoot. I'll never forget it. We were doing a photo shoot with Jeremy Saffer for Outburn. It was the cover shoot, and it was before a show, and I just felt such anxiety about everything, and I had a full blown panic attack to the point where they called the EMTs there, and they did an EKG on me, and it held up the whole photo shoot by like an hour. It was kind of a pretty aggressive experience, and there's only so much you can see when you really try in your life to be a good person and to be positive. There's only so much you can see of people saying that you're terrible, you're awful, or you're a monster without it manifesting in one capacity or another. And I think it hardened me in a way that is positive, if that makes sense. I think several years ago, I was in a place where those things affected me a lot more intrinsically. And again, to the degree that I ended up having a panic attack and feeling being in a very difficult way. But this phrase, I'm alive, I'm here, kept floating through my head. I'm okay. And then that became a kind of rallying cry in my mind, even just with myself. You cannot remove someone's hope. You cannot remove someone's zest and zeal for life or interest in striving forward or achieving things. You can't remove that. You can only attempt, if you're, in my opinion, an unethical person, to tamp that out by virtue of your own sort of anger or a behavior that tries to remove something from someone. But if you are someone and you possess that hope and strength, it can't be removed. You can only feel that way. It's not someone's not going into you and removing your hope bone or whatever. Like it is, it's entirely circumstantially based on emotions. And so I just decided in that moment that what we do is important and the art that we make is important and the message that we have is important. And I'm not going to let a barrage of negativity be the thing that defines the way that I am. And many people do. And I actually, I can understand that there are a lot of people who get caught up in um, spending all their time being angry at the people who are angry at them, and I'm victim of it all the time. I mean, there's many videos of me screaming at people in the crowd, and I try to defend myself as often as possible in a way that is positive, but sometimes you fall prey to the negativity. And I wanted this song to be a little bit of leaning into that negativity, but in a positive sense. And the idea that it's okay to be really fucking pissed off sometimes. And if you hear this song and it makes you feel um, those things, or a circumstance that you're going through in your life, or representative of someone that is pissing you off, and this resonates with you, I think that's okay. Just as in the past, in terms of my lyrics, I've tried to talk about how it's okay to not be okay. It's also okay to be pissed off and angry sometimes, and it doesn't need to be in service of a positive thing. Sometimes it's okay to take a beat, be really pissed off, and say, "All right, I'm alive, I'm here," and you move on. But in the moment, you're really fucking angry. And so the lyrics to this song, for me, represent that real anger and um, upset, but couched in the fact that we're here, we're moving forward, we're doing what's good in life, and we're trying to live our best life and be as kind as we can. Um, I'm not saying that this is a song that is radiating kindness by any means, but it's certainly a song that for me was representative of that idea. Now, this is kind of an interesting little tidbit. Later on, we were doing the photo shoot for the first batch of promo photos for this record cycle. And Josh Schultz, our friend, had a playlist on of Bruce Springsteen songs. And I came to realize that I believe the song is called Ghost in My Guitar, that there is a very similar sentiment in that song to this song, and one that I did not realize I was channeling. Ironically, the song Ghosts, with the title there, I was channeling a very similar idea here. And that was really cool to me because the record that's on, the Letter to You record, um, in the very early part of 2023, when we were touring in the UK, I listened to it in totality, before every show. And I thought about my family members who I had lost, and I thought about the tough times that we had all been through. I thought about the tough times that the band had been through. And that record really helped me in that way. And so the fact that, you know, a year and so later, when we're working on the pre-production process of this record, the fact that that came through in the writing and was influenced by that record in an indirect way, I thought was a really cool thing, and also speaks to the very magical nature of music and the ways that it can help us and be important to us and help us to find something within ourselves. This is one of my favorite songs on the record. I really love that it feels sincere to me in its attitude. And it's a song that gets me very hyped up when I hear it. So I hope you love it. That's Alive. Revenger. Revenger is my first, I suppose, I would say my first attempt lyrically to write entirely from a perspective that I do not have. And what I mean by that is, I have always been interested in the sort of ethical dilemma that we have culturally of cheering for justice. When I was, I guess, about 14 years old, 14 or 15, I guess it must have been 15, I saw the movie V for Vendetta, and it really was revelatory for me. And one of the things that is, in retrospect, you look back and a bit concerning, is the exciting or revelatory nature of watching this guy get revenge in a very aggressive and at times violent, I mean, obviously very violent way, and how we as an audience cheer for justice through violence. Cut to all these years later in movies like John Wick or Nobody, or these kind of, Taken, I believe, was, kind of a Kickstarter for that genre. And this idea of someone is wronged, and so they're going to do extreme levels of violence to people, and we as an audience will cheer along. And by the way, I'm not trying to make a judgment call on that. I watch those movies, and of course, anyone who knows me knows that V for Vendetta is, as I said, a revelatory thing for me. I have the logo tattooed on my arm. It's very important to me as a piece of media, both the original comics written by Alan Moore and the film that came out in 2006. So those are important elements in terms of my interest in narratives and perspectives. But I had never written a song lyrically from the perspective of someone else, or at least not to this extreme of a degree. And I was thinking about all the different ways in which revenge exists, or how we think about revenge. And one of the ones that is often explored is obviously that revenge through violence. And so I started thinking, well, what would it be like to write a song that is essentially the song that the person who's about to get revenge through or about to get justice through violence is singing to themselves in their mind. You know, I pictured this song as a person driving a car really fast, and they're looking at themselves in the rearview mirror, and they're thinking this song, and they're justifying the sort of abhorrent or violent behavior that is about to happen because they've been so wronged, and the people who are about to get screwed up have what's coming to them. And so, in that way, I thought it would be an interesting exercise to write lyrics from the perspective of someone who is trying to see out the ultimate form of justice and the sort of the hollowness of that, and how it is so surface level. The times that we feel rage and the times that we feel like we are wronged, we often do so without the sort of nuance of critical thinking. We think very black and white. This person is wrong, I am right, and I'm gonna win in some way, right? But the reality is revenge doesn't win. You can't really win something because, say, in this most extreme example that I'm giving in the song, you have a person who is seeing out their revenge fantasy to the nth degree. Well, they haven't won anything. In fact, their life is, by my opinion, at least from an observer of the narrative that I concocted, much worse off for moving to violence and that sort of thing. So I wanted to be able to speak about that. And then the other element of that is because I was writing from someone else's voice, this felt like the kind of song that would be best served by having someone else's voice on the song. And so we brought in Rob Flynn of Machine Head, who was someone that is an interesting sort of, we really don't have much crossover in terms of our audiences. And I don't mean to say that you can't listen to Machine Head and Black Veil Brides, but there's not often many people who are saying my two favorite bands are Machine Head and Black Veil Brides, even though there's certainly commonalities within our music, but we exist in two different worlds within the metal world, so to speak. So the reason that he was kind of came to mind first was A, his voice and tonally his style I thought was perfect for this. And B, he is someone who was one of the first real defenders of Black Veil Brides in the early days. And when we were getting absolutely shit on by every other metal band in the hard rock world, Rob Flynn and Machine Head stood up for us and said positive things about us. And that has maintained that for years and years. And so it just felt like a natural fit because this record, so much of it is rooted in that idea of getting back at your detractors. And this is someone who stood up with us against those detractors. So it made sense from both a musical perspective, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for him as a musician, but also from a narrative perspective because he's been involved in this trenches, so to speak, with us going through these years of dealing with torment and, again, the detractors and everything else. So it felt like the perfect combination. It felt like the perfect jumping off point. And for me, obviously developed into a book and all these other things because this story was one that was really interesting to me and something that I was very happy to get to continue to pursue and will continue to pursue as, this character continues to develop. But it was a jumping off point for me to do something I had never done musically, which was to take some of these more narrative-oriented stories written from another person's perspective and put them into a song. And I think it's one of my favorite songs on the record because of it. And that is Revenger. Sorrow. Sorrow was a song that for me was kind of a long time coming lyrically. I wanted to talk about the feelings that we sometimes have against ourselves. So much of the record and so much of my writing is about this sort of outward anger against somebody else or the outward perspective of what you have done wrong to me. And I wanted to touch on within that feeling and within the sort of ways in which we deal with revenge. There is often times where, at least for me anyway, there are moments from my life that I am upset with myself. Things that I did, ways that I acted, particularly when I was younger, that were not to my own ethical compass or were not me in a true way, and those regrets that you sometimes have for your own past behavior. And at least for me in those days when I was drinking and, being sort of not myself and, putting myself in bad situations and being a bad husband, being a bad friend, being a bad everything, son, whatever it is, just not being the person that I should have been. The shame that you sometimes feel, at least for me, would precipitate that behavior. So then I would double down and be more blackout drunk or whatever it is because I was in a position where I'm already letting the people I love down, so I might as well keep going. And then all those years later, when I started to sober up and really try to fix myself from an ethical perspective and work on myself and become the best version of myself, initially, you get that euphoric feeling of the change. And then, at least for me, after the euphoria of, hey, everything's better now, comes the sadness of, well, shit, what about that time that I wasted and did all those fucked up things or acted that fucked up way or wasted time or was blackout drunk when I could have been doing something positive or whatever it is. And I wanted to be able to write about that as directly as possible because it's sometimes the feeling of anger and frustration and fuck you is not always directed at somebody else. Sometimes it's directed at yourself. And I didn't want that to go unnoticed within the context of all these stories that I'm telling it from the same narrative perspective. I wanted to be able to talk about the fact that it is very true that all of us at some point, particularly if we have this sort of chip on our shoulder mentality, will look inward. And I'm not saying, hey, that's good to do. I'm simply saying that it exists and it's something that I have experienced. And I wanted to be able to write about that. I wanted to write about that feeling of sorrow and being your own enemy at times and feeling that devil on your shoulder and feeling the ways in which you let people down. And I think ultimately, in the context of this record, it's not a moment of celebration. It's also not a moment of abject sadness because you were speaking about it, or at least I'm speaking about it, from the perspective of being outside of it and moved beyond it. Sometimes looking at your own past misgivings is the greatest way to make sure that you no longer give you no longer perpetuate those misgivings. At least for me, knowing that there were times in my life when I was not true to my best version of myself has helped me as I've gotten older to maintain the version of myself that I do feel is that best version. Every day of my life, I'm not the greatest I could be, but I certainly strive to be more often someone that comes out and does good and tries to be good to the people around me and to myself more than I am ever destructive. And so this song is an amalgamation of all those times and all those feelings and the ways that we often feel like we are alone in the world with our own sadness and the sorrow that can come from that and the sort of feeling of wasted time and wasted energy and wasted love because you screwed people over, you acted like an asshole or you did something fucked up or you acted in a way that was terrible to yourself or your health or whatever it is. And so I wanted to take a moment within this record and really speak directly about that sorrow and that feeling of being an enemy in some capacity. From a overarching perspective on this song, this again was one of the first songs that was put together for the record. With Ben and Paul also came in as co-writers on this song with Jake and I. And I think it's one of those songs that feels grand in scale. I sort of said in many ways, this song feels like a good sort of bridge song between the previous record and this record. It's almost like it could have fit on the Morning EP to me in a way. It feels very sort of Phantom Tomorrow era-esque with the other sonic qualities that this record has. And I think that makes it a really special and standout song on the record. And I really, really love it. And that's Sorrow. Ave Maria. Ave Maria is a song that, for pretty much from the beginning, was certainly one that we knew was going to be one of the heavier songs on the record, just the musicality of it being the way that it is. But also, I wanted emotionally for it to feel as aggressive and as angry as possible because that's where we're at in the story. If we're looking at this sort of long form idea of revenge and vindication being seen through different forms throughout life or throughout existence or throughout, your own emotional journey, this song represents the sort of beyond reproach, point of no return. This is where you are. This is how you are. This is how you feel. You've become hardened by the situation. And I think that this song stands out for me in the way that, I enjoy, if I'm honest, I enjoy writing these sort of pissed off songs. A lot of our records have songs like this, whether it's Stolen Omen or The Shattered God, or, a lot of the fourth record was like this, but also songs like Throw the First Stone. In my life, No One from Andy Black, like there's a lot of songs that kind of have this very angry but subtly angry vibe, and I wanted this song to feel like a more hit you over the head sort of aggressive song in that way, and a very personal one. The reality is that for as hard as we try as people to be good people or do the right thing, there are going to be circumstances that occur in our lives where people don't like us or don't like the things we do or say or don't like the choices we make. And at some point, you have to just be okay with that and go, well, fuck off. This is how I am. And this is what I think or what I do or whatever else. And I wanted a song that kind of represents that unabashed, two middle fingers sort of thing. Now, obviously, tonally, within the context of the record, there is the ebb and flow of where we're going to ultimately end up with the final songs of the album, which is much more on the contemplative, personal side, where you're starting to feel a little bit of the other side of the coin, so to speak, that feeling that those emotions of anger and rage that we've seen, whether it's on Revenger or on this one, or even about yourself on Sorrow, those feelings start to become much more isolating and lonely. And we get to that with the last couple songs of the record. But this to me represents a real singular moment of unabashed anger, and really a great representation of that idea of revenge and vindication. And fuck you, this is how I am, and this is the way that I am, and you can't change that about me, or whatever it is you want to say. So I think that there's a long lineage of that in hard rock music. There's a lot of songs that sort of occupy this place, and for me, a lot of the times those have been songs that, even if they are, I don't know, more personal in nature, I have always loved. A great example for me lyrically is a song. There's a song called "Jaked" on Green Beers by Alkaline Trio that is very much a pissed off "fuck you" song. But given that it's a what you might call pop punk song, it's very kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't say happy sounding, but it's tonally, it doesn't have the aggression. So I like the idea that lyrically this song really mirrors the musicality, and what Jake wrote for the music is so aggressive and crazy, and it feels extremely Black Veil Brides in that way. I think that musically this song feels like it could totally fit in on some of those crazier compositions on Set the World on Fire. Songs like Love's Always Fair or Youth and Whiskey or New Religion, that are, kind of the Jake and Jinx just going absolutely crazy songs, and CC going a million miles an hour. I love this song. I think it's one of the most one of the most Black Veil Bride songs on the record, whether it's that gang vocal refrain or obviously lyrically very pissed off chip on the shoulder thing, the religious references in there. Every part of this, as I listen back to everything, it feels quintessentially this band, and for that I'm really proud of it. So that is Ave Maria, and it's one of my favorites. Woe and Pain.
This is the house of woe and pain. I'm not staying, I will break down.
Woe and Pain is something that the title came from a reference from Paradise Lost, and there was a version of a song. It really had nothing to do with this song, just a song that I used the title for earlier in the pre-production process, an entirely different song that we ended up scrapping. But the idea, when initially this record was much more centered around the story of Paradise Lost, this was always kind of a central theme. And I liked the idea of using, I don't know, this overwhelming feeling to represent the woe and pain, right? This idea that you're sort of trapped in uh, a ruining of your own making, or you have isolated yourself to the degree that these dark feelings and these things that are all encompassing are ones that are you have put upon yourself in some way. And what do you do in those moments but rise out of it? Your only choice is to remove those shackles that you've created for yourself and rise out of it and find a way to get back to life as a thing of joy and a thing of inspiration and striving, as opposed to a thing that is so heavily oriented around or to do with revenge and vindication. Now, these themes are a constant loop for me personally. There are moments when I am incredibly vindictive, and there are moments when I am chilled out and happy and excited about things that are happening for me artistically. And I think that I am those things in equal parts and equal measure. And for me, this song lyrically really represents the moment where you start to go, maybe I'm obsessing over the darkness too much. And I wanted to be able to represent that in a way that has a tangible understanding or a feeling that you can get from this song that feels like I'm speaking about something that maybe you could picture. So putting it in this sort of the house of woe and pain, and describing the house and describing the things you see around you. The idea was to try to kind of find a visual representation through my words of the prison of your own making, right? And I think that this song is a very unique moment within the context of the record, but also within the context of our catalog. It is not often that I have been, as a lyricist, able to, at least in my opinion, find moments of conveying something this deep and dark while still having that through line of positivity. And not to celebrate myself or anything, but I think that this song is one of the more effective at discussing that and finding the point of, but I'm going to get through this. I'm not going to let this hold me down. I'm going to break these chains, and I'm going to begin again. And the lines changing at the end of the song to describe that in the final chorus, I think it's such a cool moment on the record. And I'm really, really happy with how this one turned out. I will say, just as a little side note, from Jake's original demo for this song through to the moments in the recording studio, I remember saying, I cannot wait to hear Cece record this song. And I think that if you've heard the song, you know that in the sort of bridge breakdown section, there is a machine gun blast kick drum pattern that happens that I knew that CC could do it, but I was very excited to watch a person play that in real life, and he nailed it, and he did it for real. And it's a humbling thing for me anytime I get to witness just the tremendous amount of artistic talent that people have in this band and that these guys have. The members of this band and their talents as musicians are unparalleled, and I would put them against any other band in the world. And I feel so lucky to get to be a part of this and to get to witness the tremendous talent that exists within this band. And so, this song really is a standout song, and there's so many great examples of things throughout it. But I always just think about CC's, rocket speed feet playing the breakdown section on this. And I love this song. One of my favorites from the record, and a great way to sort of wrap up the story as we fade off into the final song coming up with Eschaton. Eschaton. Eschaton is the only song on the record that was written entirely in the studio. On a lot of previous records that we've made, I would say pretty much everything from Wretched and Divine on. Actually, that's not necessarily true, because the fourth record we kind of did a little bit of both, but a lot of the times we would write the entire record in the studio, meaning that every day we'd go in and we would work all day on writing a song. The next day we would track that song, and then we would start over, and that process would continue until we felt we had an album. Now, sometimes there would be riffs and ideas that Jake and Jinx had that they would bring in to the studio, but by and large, we would be working every day on writing the material that was going towards the record. And this process started with Wretched and Divine. The first two records were entirely, as a lot of, longtime fans of the band would know, were entirely musical compositions that were developed by Jake and Jinx prior to even joining Black Veil Brides. The two of them were working together on writing instrumental pieces. And then I just wrote over top of them. So that was probably what developed the early sound of the band. Now, for this record, nearly every song, in fact, every song but Eschaton, was fully mapped out prior to us going into the studio itself, where Jake and I were writing back and forth to one another, sending each other songs, sending each other ideas constantly throughout the course of the pre-production process, to where we finally got into the studio with an album's worth of material that was ready to go. And Jake had built demos out for all of them so that we could track exactly what we knew the structures of the song were. And then once in the studio, we would start adding things like, bells and whistles. I might change something. I might change the way I'm singing something, or I change some lyrics here and there. Most of the songs I went back in and tried to really refine and rewrite as we were going through so that they would be optimized in terms of the way that I was conveying my message, but also the way that I was singing the songs. So there were certainly changes that were made in the studio. Plus, then we had instrumentation and everything else. But the bulk of the material was written before we stepped foot together in the studio. With Eschaton, as was the case with the other interludes on the record, essentially, this was something that Jinx was working on musically from the day that we all got together in the studio. Jinx had a little sub-studio that he was working on his large-scale pieces, and then we knew that we had an orchestra coming in, so he was building out the charts for what they would be playing when he was conducting the orchestra and all that kind of stuff. And early on, I sort of felt like we didn't have an ending to the record in that way. Initially, in my mind, Woe and Pain was going to finish the record, and it certainly felt like it was a finality, but I felt as if the emotion of this sort of all starting over again, and the idea that there was a cyclical nature to revenge and vindication, that there would be some way of showing that once you get through the winning and, oh, I've gotten revenge, the sort of isolated loneliness, to use that term again, that you might feel from quote unquote winning, that there is no winning in this life. And it's not to say that, oh, it's not worth it and that life is lonely and sad. In fact, it's the opposite. I'm saying in the song that you cannot defeat everyone else in life, and that should not be the goal. And for as often in my life as I have spent time trying to get back at my detractors and prove people wrong and work harder so that they can't be right and all that other stuff, the reality is what truly makes life worth living is the positive stuff, the joy, the love, the friendships, the art. All those things are the things that make it worth doing all of this. And the vindication and revenge, sure, they're a means to an end. They push you further throughout the context of doing the things you want to do. And for me, that chip on my shoulder has been a benefit, but it is not everything. And as much as I would like to say that I'll never do it again and I'll never go through that cycle, it happens constantly. Something pisses me off. Somebody says something negative. Somebody doesn't believe in the band or me or whatever it is, and the cycle starts over again. And so I talked to Jake and Jinx about what if there was something that sonically represented that feeling of, well, I won, but what do I do now? And so Jinx started working on this piece, and it was meant to be less of a song and more of a means of wrapping up the story of the record, a way of saying, this is how it ends, and at what cost, and where are you in your life when you get through to this ultimate point of revenge and vindication. And so Jinx put it together. We went through a few different iterations of it. Then Jake took it and kind of built out what the song was going to be. And then I wrote the lyrics to it and tracked it all pretty quickly once the instrumental was done by Jinx. And I would say that vocally and just in terms of performance, there's so few times in my life that I have felt this level of absolutely dialed in with what the performance was, with how I wanted to sing the song, with how I wanted to convey the things I was saying within the song. It just felt exactly right. And it felt like the perfect ending to the record, because if you listen to the record as a complete body of work, say you were to listen on a CD or you were to loop the album, The sounds at the very end of Eschaton loop back around to the sounds at the very beginning of the Invocation to the Muse. And the idea there is to show the very cyclical nature of vindication and revenge. That so often we go through this, fuck you, I'm going to get you, I'm going to prove you wrong. And you do it, and then it all starts over again. And for me, that's been a constant throughout my whole life. And I wanted this record, if nothing else, to speak about the things that I have experienced from a lyrical perspective and what I'm writing simply from the lyrics that I'm trying to convey. I wanted you, the listener, to know that this is something about me. And if it's something about you or you relate to it, then that is excellent. And I'm happy to know that you were able to find something that resonated with you within the art. But this is something I wanted to share. This is a truth of my life, and it's a thing that has motivated me. It has hindered me. It has been a massive part of my artistic output and who I am as a person since I was 6 years old and playing sports and trying to, prove that I was good at it or whatever it is, In my life, I have used this as a motivating factor, and I have used this as a thing that has pushed me forward, and I have had moments of absolute abject sadness and isolation because of the fact that I have pushed myself constantly to try to get my revenge and to win over my detractors. And I wish I could tell you that there was some moment of clarity or some moment where I realized the futility of all of it and then it never happened again. But the truth is, this cycle happens constantly. And I wanted to be honest about that with the lyrics on this record. So I hope that when you listen to this album, you know that I have been sincere in the things that I have tried to share from a lyrical side, and that the band means every note and every word of this record, and that we care greatly about the music that we make. And I think that this record truly represents that and is a very special one for us. This record is a time for the band that has been the most inspiring, both creatively and fulfilling emotionally. We have never gotten along better as a band. We have never had more fun creating art together. And we have never been more proud of something that we cannot wait to show you. So I hope that when you listen to this, whether you have listened to the record yet or not, when you listen to this, I hope that I have been able to convey to you the meanings of these songs, at least however I see them. But the most important thing, and what I will leave you with, is that no matter what I say these songs are about, it doesn't matter. Music is entirely subjective. These are the things that I was thinking when I wrote the lyrics, but it doesn't mean that that's what the song means to you. What the song means to you is most important, and what you take away from it and how you can apply it to your life and the ways in which you can find meaning in it when you're listening to it in your headphones or in your car or at your computer or wherever you are, that is what matters. The songs in our life that come in and are impactful on us aren't written for us. They're written by the songwriter, and we find the elements of ourselves within them that reflect things about us that are important. So I hope that this record reflects something in you. I hope that you find joy and anger and upset and happiness and all of the emotions that rock and roll can bring to you. I hope that you find them all on this record. I hope it's meaningful to you, and I hope that you've enjoyed it.